Hi, here we are, back in winter. Been an awful summer, isn't it? I think here in the UK we must have had maybe like 19 days that were anything like summer. The rest of it's been absolute rubbish. And it's I've parked here at my local village and it's just started raining again. Anyway, right, I'm going to talk about this guy today, the Nikon DF. I think the last video I did a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, was about the Zf, which I've had now for getting on 6 months, I guess, and I've done loads of weddings with it. It's my main camera for weddings, absolutely love it. I have just got the 50mm 1.4 Z lens that's come out fairly recently. Previously I've not liked Z lenses. They lack character. They're just all about sharpness and just don't do anything for me at all. I had them when I had the Z8 last year. Didn't like them, and have gone back to using the old f-mount lenses on the ZF. Whole range of prime lenses, obviously. So the ZF kind of got back into the cameras from, you know, when I started doing photography, film cameras with knobs and dials, and I really like it actually. It's not the most practical thing for weddings, but there's just something about it. There's and certainly for manual focusing on the ZF, it's absolutely brilliant. And there's a few things about it that are absolutely brilliant. The main one being the image quality. It's brilliant. It's actually better than the D780 and the Z6 II. It's got allegedly got the same sensor, but I think they've definitely done something to the way it processes the data, because the skin tones are just absolutely to die for. The colours are, the whole thing is beautiful with these f-mount lenses, and I'm hoping the new Z-mount 50 1.4 lens is going to give me equally lovely character photos. But I'll do an update on that when I've taken it to a wedding next week. Meanwhile, the DF, why have I got this? Well, as I say, the ZF got me back into these sort of cameras, and I thought it would be nice to have a camera which I could mount the f-mount lenses on without having an adapter. So I looked around, was horrified at how much these things cost. This one was almost new. I think I got it with 200 shots on, and I paid just under £1,000 for it, and that was a good price. There were many out there at £1,100 or £1,200, so $1,300–1,400. It's going to become a collector's piece, I believe, and I can understand why. It is a lovely to use camera. It's got a better grip than the ZF. I can actually do that. This hasn't got a third-party grip. The ZF, you've really got to have a grip on that, and everyone I see has bought a third-party grip for it. So this DF is nicer from that point of view. It's actually smaller than the ZF. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a bit lighter. The knobs, dials and buttons are every bit as well made and as nice, and in some ways actually better thought out than the ZF. The ZF has got a big problem with auto ISO. There's no way of quickly turning off auto ISO or changing the settings. This, if you set the auto ISO up in the menu and you just shoot on aperture priority and decide, oh, I think I want the shutter speed on this a bit faster than, say you've set the default to 200th of a second and you're going to shoot the bokeh toss or something, you need 1,000th of a second. Well, you can easily go into manual, of course, and change it all then, or you can just press the button here and you can zip around the ISO dial to a figure, much higher ISO, that will push up the shutter speed and get you exactly the same as switching to manual in an instant. It's absolutely brilliant. The dials are lovely to use, really lovely. The dial at the front here is actually the same as on every other Nikon camera, with the dial sort of here. But on the ZF, that front dial is actually quite difficult to get to because it's right over in the corner, and to sort of get your finger on it, you've got to sort of do that. It's quite difficult. This one fits on the finger much better, and is very much more easy to use to change the aperture. So that's the camera, the images, and that is the main reason that I'm talking about this. The images, the character, well, the whole thing coming straight out of this camera are the best images I've ever seen from any camera I've ever had, and I'm including the Z8, the ZF, the Leica M10, the D700. I believe this beats them all. As I say, with decent f-mount glass on, they've just got so much pop, so much colour, so much contrast. The dynamic range is absolutely stunning. I did a wedding, my last wedding with this was on a bright sunny day, and I've got lots of shots out in the garden, really bright sun, blue sky, well, blue sky with some fluffy clouds in, and obviously dark shadows in the bushes and the trees and that kind of thing. And you can just go into Lightroom and you just pull down the highlights and the sky comes back completely. You've got blue, you've got white. There's not a single part of a cloud that I've got that's blown out. And you can lift the shadows, and it's absolutely incredible. I'm just blown away by a 10-year-old camera with a, what is that? That's a 15-year-old lens on. It's amazing. So I've come out to do a little bit of street photography. I've actually had a fairly quiet month. I've only had 2 weddings this month, so I've had some spare time, and I've indulged myself in some street photography. I went down to London, been to Cambridge, Ipswich, Waterfront, and I've been playing around with cameras to try and find what's a good camera, because I'm not going to do weddings for another 10 years, maybe another couple of years, but then I want to do something maybe a bit different. I've been doing weddings for 10 years now, and I really love street photography. Not your typical street photography. If you know Saul Leiter, if you don't, look up Saul Leiter. His sort of urban artistic photography is what I'm into, and this is a bit big for that, so I've just come out to have a play with this up at my local village here, and I'll show you some shots in a minute. But for proper street photography, when I go out for most of the day, this is too big. The ZF is okay, it's still a bit big. The lens, the 50mm lens that I've just got, is still sort of that long. It's a bit more noticeable than I really want to be. So, cut a long story short, a couple of weeks ago I got a Fuji X-T4 or 5, the latest one, 4 I think, could be 5. Anyway, the latest one, and I just didn't get on with it. I'm sorry. I know there's going to be lots of people who love Fuji. I've had a couple of Fujis. I've had an XE4 and an XE1, an X Pro 2, and I think something else. Oh, and X100T or F, I can't remember. And so I've had some Fujis, but the XT4 or 5, oh, it's so complicated. The buttons and dials weren't really very good. For instance, this lever here, which is tucked nicely out the way, on the Fuji it's right around the front, and so many times just walking around, you know, where did I take it? Yeah, I took it down to London, just walking around, and you've knocked that lever because it's sticking out the front here. Same with the lever over this side. I knocked it from single shot to HDR loads of times. Not very well designed at all, I don't think. Anyway, that's gone, and that is being replaced for street photography with what I hope is going to be a camera that I can use for a long time for street photography, and that's going back to Sony, to the A7C Mark II with a small 50mm 1.8 lens, which I might upgrade at some point to the 50mm 2.8 G Master, which is also a tiny little lens, and will be a nice, small, really discreet sort of thing to be walking around doing street photography with. I looked at a load of options. By the way, of course, we've got the Leica M10, but even though I've had that for over 6 months now, I still really haven't got to grips with it. Maybe I'm just not good enough. I cannot always nail the exposure. It's close, but it's not perfect, especially doing street photography, because quite often I've got, in fact, like I've got here, rain on the windscreen, which has got really bright highlights, dark stuff in the background, and I want to choose what the exposure is. So I really need an EVF. So this isn't the best thing for that. It's got live view, but it's like a typical Nikon from 10 years ago with live view, not particularly great. And the Nikon manual focus, yeah, okay, if it's a simple shot, if you're taking a picture of, you know, a road sign, something like that, it's easy. Trying to take a picture of people mingling in a group, or a reflection in a window of something that's actually over there, it all gets a bit, I don't know what I'm focusing on. So that whilst I bought it with the hope that it was going to be a street photography camera, really hasn't turned out to be the right camera. I'm not going to get rid of it because I'm just going to stick it on the shelf and look at it. It's beautiful. But the Sony, as I say, it should be hopefully the right camera, and obviously when that comes in 3 days time, I think it's due, I'll go out and hopefully, it's supposed to be sunny in a few days time, we'll go out and we'll talk about that Sony A7C Mark II. Meanwhile, I'm going to go out and take some shots with this. When I get back home, I'll upload them to Lightroom, we'll have a look through them, and I will blow you away with the image quality from this thing. Okay, so back indoors in Lightroom, and about 30 seconds after I finished the video in the car, got out of the car and started just spitting with rain, and within 30 seconds it was absolutely chucking it down. So I didn't get very many shots at all, but let's have a look through quickly what I did get, and then we'll look at some wedding ones as well. So straight out of camera, let's have a look at, we can see we've got, the highlights are not blown out. Let me just, and shadows. So I haven't got anything clipped, top or bottom. If I drop the highlights and the exposure a little bit, the sky completely comes back, absolutely brilliant. And if I lift the shadows, give it some whites, maybe a little bit up on the exposure, and there we have a pretty good picture. I mean, I could apply a preset just to the sky if I wanted to drop that down a bit more, but brilliant photos. 100% crop on a 16 megabyte 12-year-old camera. Pretty good, I think. In fact, let me just show you this one, because this was a very high ISO, 12,800 ISO, and I love these photos at high ISOs out of the DF. So let's look at this one, and then we'll look at some wedding photos which have got a bit more interesting things to talk about. So this one, absolutely straight out of camera, as you can see, no grain, nothing happening there. If you look at it 100% crop, you can see we've got, it is noise, it's 12,800, so we have got noise. If I drop the blacks a bit, you might see it a bit more. Not really, no. Anyway, that, from where I'm sitting, doesn't look like grain noise at all. It looks like film grain. It is absolutely, it's lovely. There's nothing wrong with that at all. If I, let's zoom out, apply one of my presets, which also adds some grain, you can see we've now got some grain added, a fair amount of grain actually. Again, that's now gone a bit overexposed maybe, and you can see it doesn't actually look any different. It's put grain on there over the top of the noise, and it just looks lovely. I really like it. I love shooting this camera at 12,800 because when that's printed 24 by 16 or something, that will look really, really nice. Over here, that's not noise, that's film grain from a 400 or 800 film stock. Right, let's have a look at some wedding ones. So let's have a look at this one first, where the bride was getting ready. Really bright sunny day outside, no lighting whatsoever inside, and only these windows light in the room, so it was pretty dark inside, as you can see. Again, nothing added, absolutely straight out of camera. And if I simply drop the highlights, I can get rid of the overexposed, the blown out highlights. If I drop the shadows, you can see we've clipped the shadows, but if I just lift the shadows slightly, the whole of that comes back and we have a beautiful photo. The colours, I've done nothing to it other than lift the shadows, drop the highlights, haven't even touched the exposure. Absolutely gorgeous photos. The colours are superb. And let me just show you one more to show off what it does with skies. Which one should we choose? Okay, let's do this one. Let me reset that. Right, straight out of the camera. Nothing actually clipped. No, a long way off being clipped for the highlights, and the shadows quite some way off for those as well. And this is a day, this was, as you can see, it's full sun, and I'm standing behind a bush in complete shadow. So I just drop the highlights and we'll get the sky back to being absolutely gorgeous, and lift the shadows, we'll get all the details back in this bush, drop the overall exposure just a tad. There we have, again, fantastic image quality, absolutely gorgeous from my 24 1.4 f-mount lens. I love this camera, and it'd be very interesting on a Wednesday, where we're now 4 days time, when the Sony a7C II arrives. Hopefully the sun will be out. I'll go and take some similar shots, and I'd be very interested to see how the image quality of that fairly new camera stacks up against this 12-year-old camera. If you want a camera that gives you absolutely mind-blowing image quality that you can manipulate all over the place, I really do suggest take a look at the DF. It's wonderful. Okay, thanks for watching. I'll be back in a few days.